The Good Life alphabet starts with the letter Q, and it's from Ben Quist because he's the man. Forget Quisp and Quake. There's only one Q that counts. It's Ben Quist. Ben Quist, here you go. What do you got for us today?
Wow, that was an impressive intro. Holy smokes! Wow, very nice, Jack. Very nice. Well, yes. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about. There's a key concept that I think that a lot of people miss in all of the onslaught of information that comes at them in the nutritional world. It's kind of like trying to drink from a fire hose. There's just so many different viewpoints and thought processes on what we should eat. Eat more protein. That's a real common one right now. Protein, you're not getting enough protein. Eat more protein. Or don't eat any saturated fat, or you're eating too much carbohydrate so there's a lot of that going on, or don't eat this particular food, but eat a lot of this other one, right. So I feel like there's a whole ton of that, but yet, one of the main concepts that I have really found to be fruitful in trying to prevent disease is just kind of not really talked about at all. So I'm going to talk about that today.
All right. Good. Well, you got my interest, and I love the little double entendre of fruitful. Very, very nicely placed.
Fruitful. Yeah. So I think everybody, who's listening right now, if you're past the age of 45, or 50, you either have a major health issue, or a friend does, or you maybe know someone that has passed away at an earlier age than maybe they should have, from the four big disease processes that afflict mankind in modern industrial societies. And those would be heart disease, diabetes, neurological disorders. What am I forgetting? Heart disease, diabetes. Which one? Cancer. Sorry. Cancer. Yeah, cancer. Did you say cancer? Okay.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. I always forget that one. But anyways, no one wants any of those, right? They're all very scary. No one wants them. And there's lots of dietary advice about how not to decline or have those things come sooner. And I had an author I read recently who I very rarely, because I read all these books nerding out on these different concepts of how do you not have a heart attack, or how, I just do that because that's the nerdy thing I like to do. And almost never do they put this concept in the book. And an author did it in this book I'm reading recently. I'm like, wow, she's the first physician to ever put this thing into writing as far as what really, for most people, what the main problem is. And hang on, I'm going to grab the book so I can read you out. I'm going to read it.
I thought cool.
She phrased it very wisely.
I like your refrigerator freezer. It's cool.
Yeah, I do too. That's way overpriced. Okay, so I've been reading this book, Good Energy. It's a book, I believe it's by a physician. And it's the same old crap. He's talking about no one has enough energy, and if they're, you're having problems with your mitochondria, producing energy, causing all these other problems. But when she came to the solution section, I was surprised to see her listing this as number one, which I really truly believe it is. And most Americans are suffering from chronic overnutrition. So it's not that we're eating too much of one thing or another thing or not enough of that thing. It's that you're just eating too much of everything. Most people just are eating too much food in general, and they never give their body a chance to kind of take a moment and do some of the different processes that it does when you're not eating so much. So that concept of chronic overnutrition, and in the book, she refers to it as consuming more calories and macronutrients that the body needs over an extended period. And usually in America, that is also coupled with, in my opinion, micronutrient deficiency. So we have macronutrient excess, right? We're eating too many carbs, too many proteins, too many of this, too many of that. But then on the micronutrient side, meaning vitamins, minerals, cofactors, polyphenols, all that good stuff, we're not eating enough of that. So we are overfed, but undernutriented. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Is nutrient is that a word? But so I really feel like that is something that many people should focus on. And that's where I always kind of lose my mind when I hear these morons touting these diets where they are so focused on macronutrient content. You have to count this and you're not having enough of those. And people just need to be focusing on eating more good quality food in general. Meaning, things that are whole quality, nutritious foods. And usually the rest of the macronutrient crap takes care of itself. So I thought that was a fascinating concept. And the Wall Street Journal had an article this last week on fasting. So you might look at that and say, okay, well, overnutrition, well, then I should fast, I should be fasting, or how do I combat that thing of this overnutrition? And things like, the one that is probably the most popular right now is time restricted eating. So individuals that are like skipping breakfast and they're doing all these things. And it was very exciting at first. There was a lot of like buzz and like, oh, these are the best things you should be doing. No one should be, let's crunch our eating window from most people eating 12 to 15 hours in a day that they're eating, crunch it down to 12 hours of an eating window, or a 10-hour window, or even like an 8-hour window. So that's time restricted eating. And that has been beginning to be studied quite a bit. And the gist of the Wall Street Journal article was that fasting, there's not enough information, or that there is information supporting that it isn't like the silver bullet for health that we thought it could have been. And, it always is interesting to me. I don't know if you have, like, you're a writer, right? So you probably, when people have summary articles, like if you have a journalist that writes an article on a topic that maybe they're not an expert in, like you're probably an expert in writing. So maybe you've seen someone write something, giving people advice on writing who wasn't a writer. And you're like, I don't know. And I got kind of the same, I get that feeling because there's a few things I know a lot about. I know a lot about exercise. I know a lot about nutrition. I do know quite a bit about fasting. And the person referenced in this article that there wasn't any good research on fasting, extending lifespan or causing different things like lowering inflammation or lowering blood sugar or better blood sugar control, like those things that really move the needle and make you healthier. Yeah. And from someone who's read a lot of the research, I cannot disagree more. There is massive amounts of credible human research studies on certain fasting techniques that they really, really help your health. It just happens to be this time restricted eating isn't maybe panning out quite as much as they had thought. So it's kind of what I wanted to talk about today and dig into a little bit.
So you're a believer in fasting. Is that correct?
I am a 1,000% believer in chronic overnutrition in the macronutrient department, that most Americans are overfed. And that is leading to insulin resistance, bigger waistlines, all of these, this low level inflammation that's happening all the time, all these different things that are killing us quicker than, because we're all going to die anyways, right? We're all dying slowly from the second we're born, right? So, but we don't want to like accelerate that, right? So there's accelerating this aging process, and it is that overnutrition component. So fasting is one way to take care of it, but when you lump everything and you're like, well, fasting doesn't really work. Well, there's a gazillion different ways to fast, so there are, for instance, the fasting method that I do that I think is the most fruitful is called Prolong, which is it's a calorie restricted fast. So you still eat, but it's a 5-day period where you have lowered your calories, and it's a particular meal plan that you follow. And not only is there just not one study, there are now 42 studies on this, and the results are unbelievable. Like people becoming non-diabetic, losing weight, inflammation markers dropping, markers of potential cancer dropping off. And it's interesting. The reason I think that happens is because when someone does like a time restricted fast, like where every day they're having a small period of time where they're not eating as much, the reason that maybe that isn't as powerful as something like the Prolong fast, where you're doing a 5-day period, is usually it takes several days for your body to get into a process called autophagy, where your body basically does cellular debris cleanup in your body, where your little Pac-Men go and eat up all the bad cells and get rid of all the bad stuff, which I think is where the magic of fasting actually happens. But almost no one can do a fast, and not that it's healthy either, because you could water fast for 3 days, right, and cause autophagy to happen. But you don't want to be doing that because it's super dangerous, and you need to be medically supervised for that. And I would never recommend that to anybody. But this Prolong fasting, actually, it is completely safe. It's been studied on thousands and thousands of human beings now, and it puts you into this where you're eating food, but it's causing your body to think you're fasting. So you do it long enough that you actually get into the autophagy phase, and all those wonderful magical things start to happen. So when I read articles like that, I'm like, okay, well, yes, there's tons of available evidence that certain fasting protocols are very, very good. So that's where, and that's one of the ways that I personally deal with the fact of chronic overnutrition in my own life. So once a quarter, I do this 5-day fast. I actually just did it last week, which is why I'm talking about it today. Because every time I do it, I'm like, oh, this is going to suck. We're 5 days of but then when I'm done, I'm like, that was amazing because I feel so good. Afterwards, you really get this almost like this energy rush from doing it. And and then that article came out and I'm like, God, these people write these articles. They don't know what the heck they're talking about. It's very obvious that someone who's really into this stuff had written that article. They would have gone over many of the different fasting types. And also I believe with the time restricted eating, this is only my own personal belief that I think most people are doing it wrong. And I've changed the way that I do that. I don't restrict in the morning anymore. I always eat my breakfast as soon as I'm hungry, and I restrict at night because I think that whole thought process of eating your larger meals sooner in the day as early as possible and then eating your smaller meals later in the day and chopping it off sooner. I think if they were to study just that, they would find that that had some health benefits for people. So by that, I mean, if your last meal was at 6 p.m., that's it. Kitchen closed, nothing else till you go to sleep at 10 p.m. So I think that's a very different kind of time restricted eating than I'm not eating till 12 noon and then I'm going to eat till 9 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? So
that's like an old, first of all, you're like you're a fire hose today yourself. Holy shit.
I just get excited about this stuff. I can't help myself.
What's the first apogee? What's the what you want to get your body into? You fast
I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Autophagy. It is a large medical term. Basically, think of it like the game Pac-Man. All of your, I don't know what cells do it, but they come out like little Pac-Man and they start to eat up all of the cells that are kind of getting old and creaky and the ones that may be a little precancerous cell. We don't need that, but the body's kind of starving. So it goes and it starts to, do that kind of stuff. And even some of the fat cells start to, I don't know. It's a process by which the body, it's called a cellular repair process. Okay. And it only happens at certain points or is accelerated at certain points because it happens all the time. But it only gets this kind of charged up after several days of these lower calorie type situations. And I think that is where the magic of fasting comes from, because they don't really know for sure. But to say that there aren't human trials is just complete crap. Because there are gigantic human trials that are done with hundreds of human beings where they're placebo controlled, double blind, on human beings. It's not like this is a bunch of mouse research or not researching kangaroos from Africa on this particular strategy. It's human beings. And they're doing blood markers that 100% tie into whether you're going to live a longer life. And it's significant. It's blood pressure. It's all the biggies. Every marker that you would look at, your doctor would be like, oh my gosh, your blood sugars are getting high. Every single one of those is improved across the board. It's pretty amazing, and every time every 3 months I do this, and as the date approaches, I start to dread it. But then, I kind of review some of the research, and they actually, one of the newer studies, because when it first, and these studies have been done over the last 4 or 5 years since this method was put out there. One of the newer ones, which was really interesting, is they had a trial of individuals that were doing the Mediterranean diet. So they switched the normal diet to the Mediterranean diet, and looked at their blood markers. And they had another group that did the prolonged fasts once a quarter. I can't remember the exact protocol, but they ate the regular sad American diet and didn't change their diet, but they just did these fasting kits every so often. And at the end of the study period, the prolonged people eating the crappy diet did better than the Mediterranean people did on the Mediterranean diet. So is it even more powerful just to have these periods of time to give your body a break? And that's where, when I read articles like the Washington Post one, I'm like, gosh, I wish they would not poo-poo all these concepts and make people go, oh, fasting doesn't work. Moving on, moving on to the next stupid thing that they put out there. Because something new comes out every 3 seconds. It is a tried and true, and it is in every religion. They have, most major religions, there's periods of fasting. And I think that ancient man, or the man from 500 years ago, whenever these religions started, they baked that in because there was something good that they knew happened from it, and so there you have it.
All right. What are, I hear, I scribbled some notes down. What are micronutrients? And could you name some? Because macronutrients, it seems to me, are every major, real food, apples, eggs, chicken, beef, whatever. I may not be right on all those, but it seems like those is easier. But I rarely hear anybody talk about micronutrients.
So macronutrients are 3 of them. And they're the ones you hear about all the time in the news when another stupid diet guru comes out and tells you not to eat one or the other of them. Protein is the rock star right now. And I have medical people advising their I used to be a bodybuilder back when I was a younger man, and I used to eat lots of protein when I was a bodybuilder. They're advising like 65-year-old women that weigh 120 pounds to eat more protein than I was eating when I was a bodybuilder in my 20s when I weighed 215 pounds. It's like, it's insane. Insanity. And there will be backlash from that. There will be problems from overemphasizing one or the other. They occur naturally in a certain blend in most food other than meat. Meat just has 2 of them. It has fat and protein, but most of the things for the vegetable kingdom have a really nice mixture of all 3. Even an orange has protein in it.
Really?
So the 3 big macronutrients are protein, fat, and carb.
Mm-hmm.
When you process a food, that is usually the process by which they remove everything good from the food, which are all the micronutrients and the fiber. So, when you take any natural food and you take a potato, you turn it into a potato chip. They take out all the good things that are in potatoes or sweet potatoes, and then they turn it into this crappy thing where they've removed all the micronutrients. So the micronutrients would be your vitamins and minerals. And then there are also massive amounts of compounds that have been discovered or not discovered yet in plants, where it is really all those things we think of as like the medicine cabinet of nature. So whenever anyone is like, why would you ever want to eat plants? That's so stupid. I've heard very smart people say that, like, why would you ever want to eat a whole plant? Why would you ever eat fruit? Don't eat fruit. Fruit is high in carbs. It's because it has all those micronutrients in it. And there are many of them that, your vitamin pill is completely worthless because many of the things that are benefiting you from those vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds, they haven't even discovered all the stuff yet. So you have to eat the real stuff. You can't jump past it. You can't take some stupid pill, that has we blended up with this special compounds of vegetables and fruits, and we blended up in these 2 little pills. And that's all you need to eat. You can't do it that way. It doesn't work like that. And I think everybody knows that's true. You can try to dilute yourself. Those Balance of Nature commercials, don't talk about those. That is the one that really gets me intensely pissed off. Have you seen those ones where they have they usually have they'll have one physician that comes on. He's like, oh, well, I've been prescribing, usually it's a chiropractor. I've been prescribing all these Balance of Nature pills to my patients. And oh my God, Cindy, who's 65, is now, playing tennis again. Her knees don't hurt. And I'm, all these wonderful benefits are coming because they blended up a couple proprietary different fruits and vegetables and put in these little teeny capsules, and the person's taking them. It doesn't work like that.
Okay. I believe you. I'm with you. I'm like, okay.
Jack, open up your supplement cabinet right now. I want to see if there's any Balance of Nature in there.
There's no Balance of Nature. I've never heard of it, thankfully.
Okay, good. Right.
But I do. So I think we talked about vitamins before. Are vitamins worthless? Are taking vitamins worthless, or does it have some value, or does it depend on what vitamins?
I think it depends on what vitamins. I still feel like that's a hotly contested topic. So vitamin D is a good example. Or I think it's actually it's not really a vitamin. I think it's a hormone, but it is, they call it vitamin D. So your body produces vitamin D when you're exposed to the sun, right?
Yep.
But is it the same thing taking a tablet of synthesized vitamin D and putting it into your system as having the sun hit your skin and what your body naturally produces? I would argue it's not the same thing.
Okay.
So if you're going to move the needle with a pill versus the actual process of, your skin interacting with the outdoors, it probably isn't the same thing. And that's where I think they do all these studies, because vitamin E was a big one back in the 80s. I don't know if you remember that, for heart disease. Yeah. And then vitamin C, Linus Pauling, they'll take these different vitamins and they'll take them outside of their natural working groups. And then it's they're supposed to have these magnificent effects on the body. And then they do studies on it, placebo-controlled research studies, and it doesn't work. It's everyone got just as much cancer as they got before after we supplemented with the vitamin D. It's been disappointing with some of those results. And that's not to say that all things are equal. So one of the ones I think there is, many people do need to supplement would be some of the minerals, like magnesium is one where I feel like pretty much everybody is deficient in that. So it is a case by case basis with the different vitamins. Vitamin K2 is one that has been really in the press right now. Vitamin D is kind of like now ebbing out, and it's been shown to not work like they thought. Like, oh, don't talk about that anymore. Now it's vitamin K2 we're all excited about. Again, you should attempt to get all of that stuff from the natural ways that your body usually gets it. Mm-hmm. Even like CoQ10 is another good example. So that is produced in the mitochondria, and it's something a lot of people supplement because of the fact that when you go on a statin medication, it basically just decimates your CoQ10 production, which potentially could lead to all kinds of things like low energy and different problems. And then people will pop a CoQ10 pill, and like, now that my blood levels of CoQ10 have gotten back up where we're measuring it, is that the same thing as the cell producing CoQ10 inside of the mitochondria itself? And I would argue that
it's not.
It's questionable. So like that's where we go wrong with popping all these pills versus trying to use nature and foods and that's where eating berries, leafy greens, nuts, like all of those kinds of things are very micronutrient dense. Actually, leafy greens are the number one micronutrient dense thing there is.
Yeah, I'm a big spinach guy. I think it's great. Is broccoli a leafy green?
Broccoli is a cruciferous vegetable, so that's another one. Like there is a compound, I can't even pronounce it, but it's in broccoli. It isn't a vitamin, it isn't a mineral, but it is a compound that has been shown to really depress cancer growth. And it's one of the reasons why people that eat lots of vegetables get less cancer, so, and it even goes, and these are more associative studies, so they're not as powerful. They haven't really done a study where they fed someone a pound of broccoli a day. And, what happens if we do this, with this group of 1,000 people, no one's going to do that study. But, there are many studies that show that vegetable eaters, have much less cancer when they look at other factors. Those are the weakest kind of studies, but I think there's a group of people that throw all those studies out like, oh, those don't mean anything just because, it's an associative study, like it still means something, right? Show me an associative study that shows eating tons of meat, lowers your chances of cancer. I don't think you could find one of those, but you can find a ton of them where, eating broccoli depresses, the cancer growth in the body. So, but that is an example. There are compounds in broccoli, micronutrients that we need that you aren't going to get in your Balance of Nature pill, that you aren't going to get in your multivitamin. You have to eat the real food.
And you've told me before when you and I talked about spinach in grinding it versus eating it. There's more benefit to chewing it, correct?
Yeah, when you massacate it or you chop it, it's what releases I'll try to say it. I think it's sulforaphane. I'm saying it wrong. I know I'm butchering it. It starts with an S, but it's a compound that when broccoli is like agitated or masticated, it releases this compound, and it's a very potent anti-carcinogen. Okay. So, and that's one of the reasons why I attempt to eat a cruciferous vegetable every day. So broccoli, cauliflower, oh, it's so good.
It is good.
Kale, there's a bunch of them.
Oh, kale, I'm not going to do it.
I know kale's nasty. I don't do that one at all. I'm usually a broccoli cauliflower guy.
Yes.
So, kale.
Right. We got a question from Kent Webben, who's a gym rat,
mm-hmm.
and he's been a long time foreign fitness. What is Dr. Ben's take on athletic greens and similar superfood green powders?
So I would compare those. So Kent, if you're not going to do anything, if you're just like, I will never eat a leafy green ever, I'm not going to eat any vegetables ever, like then maybe, something like athletic greens would be like a very, very small half measure of attempting to get some of the benefits, but I wouldn't think you would get, and I'm like 99.9% confident I can almost say it with 100% confidence, you are not going to get the same benefits as eating those foods. So you cannot substitute athletic greens for eating leafy greens. Even now, I'll give you another example. So nitric oxide production. So when you eat leafy greens and you massacate them in your mouth and you chew them, there's some components in the leafy greens. Arugula is a really good one that interact with bacteria in your tongue. They interact with substances in your stomach, and it causes nitric oxide production in the body, which causes all the arteries to dilate. Which is one of the main reasons why I think leafy greens are one of the most important foods, and one of the reasons I think they also correlate so highly with not getting dementia, because of the fact that they cause vasodilation, which is blood to your brain, right? Blood to all the other good parts of your body. So I don't think you're going to get the same effect from Athletic Greens. But if you're never going to eat a leafy green, then maybe you do that, but so.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a question for you. Hydroponic. Are you familiar with hydroponics and vegetables?
Growing food, you mean that way?
Yeah.
Or
Growing vegetables in water. They're like in these nurseries. Do you know if those are actual plants and things?
Yep.
And are those as good as regular? I mean, stuff.
That's a really interesting question. I don't know, but I know that most of the plants get their nutrients from the soil, so they are pulling different components out of the soil, minerals, especially magnesium is a big one. And since there's a lot of depletion of the minerals in our farming fields, it's why we're not getting enough of that from the plants anymore. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I would wonder, just in thinking about that, I've never even thought about before, like where are some of the things that the plant is pulling from the soil? Where is the plant getting that?
Because there's a hydroponics place in Milwaukee now that's and it's selling to stores, and I've seen it in the stores.
That's a great question. I would push that back. I mean, we should ask them, do these plants have the same nutrient composition as plants that are grown in their natural way?
Yeah. Okay, I'll have to track that guy down. We talked to him. We had him on the show.
Oh, did you have him on? That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I can just speculate, but
yeah, that's interesting. Okay, then so we talked micronutrients, macronutrients. It's like you need a balance of them, correct? Would that be a way to say that, no matter or not?
So of macronutrients, typically the natural foods that you eat have a nice balance of them, like a bean, like eating beans, like the magical fruit. They have kind of a really nice blend of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, and that's why they are the basis for many diets, so many of the foods we eat already have kind of a nice balance of them. And that's where I think you can also whack things out of like when people put butter in their coffee, or they put oils, in their coffees or whatever, you're really taking an enormous amount of like pure fat and that's not normal. People don't typically eat like that, so there may be consequences, so it's usually kind of balanced naturally, but protein powders are another example. If there's a specific reason you need an enormous amount more protein, like you are a professional athlete or you're bodybuilding, or the other situation is someone is dieting or someone's on Ozempic or one of those type of medications, like they are not, sometimes those people are not eating enough, where protein becomes very important because they're really not getting enough. And then the body's catabolizing its own muscle tissue and things of that nature. So, but the average American who isn't on one of those drugs, although I think a third of the population is right now, they typically are over consuming too much of the processed foods that do not have the micronutrients.
Okay.
Or just they have less.
Yeah, when I was a kid and a young adult, it was all about weight control. It was all about dieting. You had to cut back on, it was total calorie stuff. I don't think there was any micro. I never heard of micro or macros or any of that stuff. It's come a long way in 30 years or so, I would say. Sure. But now it's like you said, one of the first things you said is it's like a hydrant of information. People are overwhelmed with all the stuff.
They're getting confused,
what should we do?
There's very easy concepts in this, so there are about like 4 or 5 things in nutrition that I think are really important for people to kind of monitor. Number one is removing refined sugar from their diet. That should be like number one. It is on every single label if a product has any refined sugars, as it's labeled as added sugar. So that's step one. So before you do anything fancy with Athletic Greens, Kent, make sure that you're not eating refined sugar. Like, let's do that step first. Then number 2 would be to eat plant foods, meaning fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans in their natural state. So basically trying to limit the amount of processed and ultra processed food in your diet. That would be number 2, it would be the next step. So those are the 2 biggies before you would do really anything else or worry about anything else. Don't worry about time restricted eating if you're eating like crap, those, and everybody knows what those things are. And as far as everyone knows what a vegetable is, or everyone knows a French fry is a processed vegetable versus a baked potato is an unprocessed vegetable. I mean, like, it's not that confusing, right? So you just have to start to eat real food. And I know it's a little bit more challenging and you have to do a little bit more possibly cooking preparation, things of that nature. But those are really the things that people probably should be concentrating on. And when I see people concentrating on those types of things, magical stuff starts to happen, especially if they combine that with exercise. I've just seen this year alone, 3 or 4 different clients become non-diabetic who are diabetic. And
that blows me away.
It's super cool to watch, and they've done it all through lifestyle. They weren't, one of the guys, he wasn't on metformin or anything. He's like, just give me a chance to try to work this out on my own. And he did it, and he did a combination of changing his diet, losing weight, exercising. And he also did some of those prolonged fasting kits, so.
Recent is one of those clients. Recently you talked about a client.
Yep. That's the guy I wrote the email on. Yeah.
And he's still doing well.
He's doing great. Well. Yeah. He's going into his next phase. He's lost about like 12 or 15 pounds of solid fat so far while gaining muscle. And now he wants to lose maybe another 10. And then he'll be in the appropriate BMI for his age and gender and weight and all that good stuff. So height. So he wants to get into that range. So
cool. Very cool. All right. Well, great. That's good for him. The people, like you said, don't overcomplicate it.
It's not that complicated, and that's where I just kind of shake my head every time I read some of the stuff, or, it's like, oh, you're making this way too complicated for people. And, or they're focusing on things that are like 18th on the list of importance. Like, I'm getting very focused on this thing, really, really, or like someone might just be focusing on what type of exercise they should be doing. It's like, just get exercising, just get moving, just move your body every day.
You remind me, you mentioned writing before. I'm taking a writing class, and the writing, there's so many questions that come in. It's a live chat. Questions come in. Mm-hmm. Should I pay for the premium X to get make sure that and the guy literally said, you're way downstream on this. Get a regular, consistent writing practice first. Then once you do that, then you can start worrying about all that other stuff. Don't worry about that yet. It's something about fundamentals. It just sounds boring in anything. But you can't break rules if you don't know the rules.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. That it's something that like I've read pretty much all the different longevity books that have come out in the last 5 years, and it's always interesting when they get to the chapter on the topics that I really know about. It's like, God, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Like if he's telling people to exercise in that particular fashion, sometimes some of them, it's been really good. Yeah. But, sometimes you really have to evaluate the person you're holding up there as an expert. When you look at the topics that you know a lot about and you see what they say, does it line up with what you know? And if it doesn't, you may or may not want to believe them on all the other things that they're saying in there, right, too, that maybe you don't know as much about,
That's a credibility crasher.
Yeah. So Peter Attia is one of them. I read his book recently and was disappointed with it in certain aspects of it, and he's one of the guys who's really pushing this high protein thing on everybody. And most of the experts that I have read, who are the guys that are actually doing the research studies on what causes animals and human beings to live longer, the number one macronutrient overconsumption that would cause you to die sooner would be protein. When you consume massive amounts of protein from some of these studies and these individuals that really look at it, that are actually doing the science and the research on animals and humans, like that's not a good route to go for a long period of time. And then you look at it even in modern, like you look at what sport has the youngest deaths of any sport? Do you know which sport they die the youngest?
No, I could guess, but should I guess?
Bodybuilding.
Oh God.
It's like professional bodybuilders, they die like 40 years younger than they should. And maybe it's the excess protein, maybe it's the drugs they take, maybe it's the massive body size that they create through the muscle tissue that they have, but who knows? But I got to tell you one thing, I'm really glad that I left that whole bodybuilding thing behind early in my life, because I do feel like I probably accelerated my aging quite a bit when I was doing that younger, but and the one macronutrient we all focused on in bodybuilding was protein, so I don't know. It's interesting.
It is. All right. Well, it's good stuff as always. You always your passion is undeniable. It's you're you're a maniac, which in a good way, which is good. But I it's so true about just getting the basics down, getting the fundamentals down, and it's a blend of everything. You can't go whole hog on anything.
So and that's where we're getting a professional involved, or that's really my main thing over the next as my career wanes, as I get old and elderly and shuffle off into the sunset. It is really me focusing on teaching the younger trainers in my crew, 36 of them on staff now, how can they convey this information in a simple fashion to our customers to make sure that they get their best chance at being healthy and living a long, healthy life, so that they are conveying the same message to the customer.
You just reminded me, what's the term, Ben? Because I was talking to someone about this. Dr. Ben uses a term. It's not your lifespan. Is it your health span?
It's your health span.
Health
span. Your health span is a very common term. And then there's another term, your play span, which is really interesting. I was playing pickleball right before I came on the call, and I'm 51, and I consider myself to be kind of like, I'm getting kind of old, but I was the youngest person. I'm the youngest person in the entire group of people that plays pickleball there, because pickleball just there's an older crowd, but the concepts of your play span really comes in when you look and watch those people move, as, people that are in their 60s or in their 70s. It's like, how long can you still do the things you enjoy? For the example of pickleball, tennis, swimming, riding your bike, but health span and play span are those two terms that I think are kind of interesting.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Good. Anything about the gym going on? We're doing the Turkey Day boot camp. We got our team all in place.
Good. You guys always usually win something, so it's fun to watch. Nothing much going on, at the gym. I always kind of like anybody that wants to get a good start on the road to fitness. It's just a very welcoming place to get going with that at either of our locations.
It is. I saw an article this week, Ben, a national magazine, saying that why aren't more men in exercise classes? It seems like most of them are women that are in the class, and that's true. However, today in our mobility class, there were only 6 chicks and like 10 dudes.
Wow. Really? Yeah. Wow. That's interesting.
I said to MJ, this is the first, I think it's the first class I've been in where the men were, I've been in where they've been even, but mostly not so much. I think it's, I don't know what it is. That's their problem, not mine. Cause I think it's nuts not to do those classes, but regardless, that was striking to me how many men were in.
Maybe she's touching on an item that a lot of men feel that they're lacking in, which is, and I will tell you, like, out of, I probably have done evals on 20 people in the last 3 months. And the number one thing I hear people, it's almost the first thing out of their mouth. I'm just not moving like I used to. I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, Z, which harkens back to play span, health span type things, but maybe it's just something that, is a lot of men are like realizing, well, I really, so that's interesting because it typically is more women than men. So
Yep. Sorry. Cool.
Quick special thanks to Kent for asking a question. I appreciate that. Nice to know one person's listening.
Well, we don't get many live, but I tell you, people comment on it. It's funny. Boy, Ben was on fire. Boy, Ben, and I was like, yeah, okay, he is. He's trouble. But that's why you have to have the big intro because you're always bringing it. You bring it.
I that article on fasting that I read this morning really pissed me off. It's like, this is just so stupid. Another person that doesn't know what they're talking about telling everybody on this big platform, where if I was to write that article, I would have written it very differently, but cool. Whatever.
All right. Have a great fun-filled, activity-filled, macro, micro.
That's right. Weekend. Yep. Thank you. You too.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye.